Hello, the world, and hello, Skwirlly Squad. Today, we discuss the age-old dilemma of whether or not it's time to upgrade your graphics card in your desktop computer. Not only that, but the philosophical argument of whether or not you even should these days. I'm here to get you thinking a bit today. Here we go. Well, you are listening to Stay Skwirlly. I am your host, Skwirls, of course, and this is the show where we talk about technology and gaming. Today, I am recording this right now. It's Thursday, February 29th, and I am doing so from the comfort of my hotel room in pseudo-sunny Vista, California. The family is here as well, enjoying the amenities of the hotel and the quietness of their relative devices while I record this episode. So if the audio is a little wonky, it's because the mic on my phone or laptop is also wonky. And fair warning, this week's episode is going to be a bit shorter because of all just the things kind of going on that happened this week and elsewhere and today and whatnot. So first off, weekly shout out to those subbing at the Skwirliest level, whether that's on Twitch or the Super Skwirly Squad memberships on Skwirls.com. Shout out to Bug Eyes, iHeart Skwirls, Blue Phoenix, Red Wing, Chubix, Gaudiest, Jen Evans, and JB Digital Geek. Thank you guys. You are the Skwirliest among us. And my family thanks you loads. Alrighty, so housekeeping. Well, reminder that if you haven't checked out the weekly or the website memberships yet, they're pretty enticing. You get the same emotes, yes, as if you subbed on Twitch, but subbing on Twitch is technically almost double the prices of the tiers, and you don't get the additional perks of the Discord role, Discord chat, early access to YouTube and podcast episodes, behind-the-scenes videos, merch discounts, yada yada. So yeah, quick ad, no shame, check it out, www.skwirls.com, SKWIRLS.com. And in case you haven't noticed on the YouTube or on my Instagram, if you're following me on Instagram, and if you're not, at Skwirls, by the way. But if you haven't noticed, I've been full swing in uploading shorts and Instagram reels for the first time as well. I'm a bit over a week now uploading them. Found this amazing feature in Adobe Premiere Pro that automatically captions the audio from my videos. So making subtitles is like super fast and easy. So as long as I have something interesting from a video or a past live stream, something like that, you'll be seeing more of those on the channels. Also, obviously, I'm out of town. By the time you're listening to this episode, you'll have already noticed that there was no stream on Friday of this week. We also didn't stream on Tuesday earlier this week since I had a bunch of prep I needed to do for this trip. So we really only streamed on Monday. But next week, I'll be back home, so the plan is the regular 3 days of streams. Finally, before we get into some news, not really much, you'll see in a second, but the Golden Acorn is Golden Acorn number 63 this week from Rosa Parks. She's quoted as saying, "We will fail when we fail to try." Golden Acorn number 63, we will fail when we fail to try. So similar to last week's Golden Acorn number 62 from James Cameron, encouraging us to set high and lofty goals. Rosa Parks this week is reminding us to try. Because if we don't, we guarantee our own failure. So don't guarantee your own failure today. If you're itching to try something, if you're considering doing something new, if you've got some goals built, but you haven't actually stepped foot out the boat, I want to encourage you guys today to make that happen, to step one foot in front of the other and to try. Because if you don't, you guarantee your own failure. We will fail when we fail to try. Golden Acorn 63 from Rosa Parks. Hopefully that can be encouragement to you guys today and this week. So this is typically where I talk to the news that came to my attention this week. But I'll be honest with you guys, since we were fully prepping for this Cali trip with the boys, I haven't really even been looking at my Google Now feed, nor have I had the time to really catch up on other gaming news podcasts that I normally would have listened to by now. So I'm sure there's something big that's happening news-wise in the gaming world right now. I just don't know what it is. Okay, I kind of take it back. I did like read a couple stories just today, and one of them did excite me a little bit. So the Superman costume for James Gunn's Superman Legacy has finally had a small reveal today. Again, recording this Thursday, the 29th of February. So he tweeted earlier about announcing that they've finally begun principal photography on the movie today, which coincidentally is apparently the birthday of Superman. Also kind of cool. Superman was created in 1938 on Leap Day, February 29th. I didn't know that. I just knew he was like made in 1938 in Ohio, I think. But y'all, this is technically spoilers. So if you don't want to know anything about the costume, anything about the costume reveal, the insignia, the shield, whatever, skip ahead like a minute or two, give or take. Okay, here we go. Spoilers. All right. The tweet is just literally only a reveal of the S shield on the Superman suit. It's got a sweet looking texture of the material of the suit, kind of gives off similar vibes to like Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, Justice League from the Snyderverse. It's a little bit different though, but it's not like just flat material like it might be on the Superman Lois TV show or the crossover, the CW crossover for the Arrowverse. It's not like a flat basic texture. There's some kind of texture to it. Can't really tell the material beyond that, but the S itself, the design of the S kind of reminds me of the Kingdom Come design, which makes sense because I believe there were like past rumors that James Gunn was drawing inspiration from the Kingdom Come miniseries in the comics, which also has a bit to do with why we see so many cast members as various super people in the movie. But I digress. So the S shield shape like reminds me of the Kingdom Come design, but replace the black background with yellow. And then around the red border, add like a little mini yellow border. And that's basically the design. I mean, it literally looks almost identical to the shape design of the Brandon Routh outfit in that Arrowverse crossover. And except his was the black background one from Kingdom Come. Really, guys, just look up the tweet ultimately. But it looks pretty cool. I'm a fan. Now, really, the real question with the costume is whether or not they're going to decide to keep the supersuit trunks. Personally, I'd love for them to keep the trunks off the suit, like they did with the New 52 stories and, of course, the Snyderverse movies, but I honestly feel like it could go either way at this point, and we'll tell. Okay, so other than that, we'll forego the news segment for today, and we will catch fully up on the news for the last 2 weeks on next week's episode. Promise. So that leaves us with just this week's featured segment coming up next. Should you still upgrade your GPU every few years? Well, a history of the PC Master Race will tell you quickly that the typical tradition, right, is to buy a mid or upper range graphics card when you first build your PC. Then, after a few years, when the GPU is outdated or you're just ready with the budget, buy the next generation to replace yours, right? If you had, a 960, then you'd replace it with a 1060 or a 2060. Right? Or 970 with the 1070 or 980 with the 1080 and so on, right? That was the idea. Then you should be set for the next handful of years with the latest games on the highest graphics settings. The concept and methodology has always worked great, right? And this has been my own personal experience as well since pretty much middle school. In 7th grade, that's when I built my first gaming PC. And over the years, I've gone through a variety of types of PCs as my main gaming rig. Custom desktops that I build myself, various laptops, gaming-specific ones, not gaming-specific ones, all-in-one computers like the iMacs, some combination thereof, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just kind of goes on. I have a bunch of different devices. We talked about some of my devices last week on last week's episode, but it's always been a staple of the custom desktops in my life to expect an upgrade to the graphics card after several years. For me, I would try to wait until the GPU could barely run the latest games anymore. This way, I would bank on the current GPU as much as I possibly could, albeit sacrificing some aesthetics in the process, right? Because I'd have to lower the graphics settings in games in order to be able to still run them. But that was fine for me. But that by doing that, instead of paying $300 to $500 every couple years, you're spending it every 5 to 7. Not so bad, right? Of a trade-off. But the question today isn't about the methodology. It's not about the history of the tradition here. The question today is whether or not this particular methodology, this practice of regularly upgrading graphics cards is practical anymore or even necessary. Now, yeah, I could straight up tell you the blanket answer. It depends, which is 100% accurate. But why does it depend? What factors or variables should go into determining whether or not you even should upgrade your GPU today? Especially with the current ebb and flow of consumer graphics card price points, which we'll talk about in a second. It's a very real question you should ask yourself. If you're like, hey, it's time for that graphics upgrade, well, here today in this episode, we're going to dive into the individual factors you yourself should consider to determine if an upgrade for you is pragmatic, practical, necessary, or even almost ethically justifiable in general. So 1, price point. The latest NVIDIA RTX 4090 with 24 gig of RAM has an MSRP of just shy of $2,000. It's $1,900 plus for the latest flagship NVIDIA graphics card, consumer graphics card. We're not even talking like a server graphics card. Like, this is something that a gamer could buy. Got freaking 24 gig of RAM, which is ridiculous. But that's a lot of cash, you guys. A lot. I bought my 1080, it wasn't the 1080 Ti, no, but it was nonetheless the GTX 1080, NVIDIA's flagship graphics card until the 1080 Ti came out. But I bought it a year after its release. It was released in 2016. I think it was May of 2016, June of 2016, something like that. Don't quote me on the month, but it was 2016. I bought mine in 2017, the summer after, for roughly $500. It was not the 1080 Ti, but it was pretty stinking close to the top of the line for its time. Even if you stick with my GPU's tier, which today would be the RTX 4080, not the 4090, right? Because I had the 1080, so replacing it with current gen would be the RTX 4080. The 4080 is currently going for almost $1,500. That's almost 3 times the cost of what I paid for my tier in 2017. The cost of these cards today is just insane. So let's consider maybe the previous 30 series, right? The RTX 30,000 series. That generation, the 3080, is currently today still going for roughly $800. This is an entire generation ago is still going for $800. Now that's a much better price point, comparatively speaking, right? Than what was it? It's $1,500, right? $800 is better than $1,500. Much better price point, but still higher than what you'd expect given history. Like when I say that I would upgrade my graphics card every few years, and it was like every 5 to 7 years, I was spending the same amount of cash every single time from like 7th grade all the way to now. Well, not to now, to 2017. Every time it was like $500, maybe even a little less. $400 or $500 could get me a decent graphics card, pretty stinking close to high end, every 5 to 7 years. And then suddenly something happened, either right before or it was probably because of the COVID issues that happened with supply chain, right? With the resin for the GPUs, for the processing units, all of that, right? I don't know the ins and outs of the finer details of exactly what happened, but it feels like we've yet to recover from that. So even a generation ago is still roughly $800 for the 80. So finally, let's go back another generation, the 2080. which is just one generation newer than my current graphics card. I have the 1080. Let's just go the RTX 2080. First time they started using the RTX, which, by the way, if you look, the 980 to the 1080 was, I believe, a 2-year gap, and there was almost 3 years from the 1080 to the 2080, if I'm not mistaken. You probably need to Google that. Don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure I remember seeing that. That 2080 today is going for about $300 to $400. That's just sad. In order to pay the same amount that I'm used to paying to upgrade every 5 to 7 years, I would have to go back 3 generations of graphics cards. It's suddenly no longer worth it, right? If you got to go back 3 generations of graphics card, yeah, sure, the RTX, you get the ray tracing and you get a minor upgrade. Okay, like you're not getting the massive RAM upgrade, you're not getting the faster rates, it's just, there's the whole point, right, is to upgrade these generations because these games demand the new features of the new graphics card generations, and bank on, or rather fully utilize the threads on these GPUs. So it doesn't make sense anymore to spend that same amount of money for what you get out of it. So if your budget has gone up, or hasn't gone up, rather, if your budget hasn't gone up since your last GPU buy, you might not have enough dough to fork out for a proper upgrade. But let's just say, for kicks and giggles, budget-wise, doesn't matter for you. Let's just say it doesn't matter. Okay, second thing to consider then. What level of graphics do you require for the games that you play? If you're playing retro-style games like Core Keeper or other 2D indie titles, then honestly, you probably don't even need a graphics card to begin with. Or if you do, it could be something from forever ago. I could run my 1080 for years to come and be perfectly content playing those types of titles. No big deal. Even though I'm used to updating my graphics card, I don't need to do it anymore because those are the types of games I play these days. Now, I do play those games, but I play other games. But I'm just asking hypothetically for you, or rhetorically even, I don't know. But let's say you play 3D games, not just 2D stuff, right? Like myself, I do play 3D games, but most of my games that I play that are 3D are still indie titles. Then I would ask you how your graphics card is doing with those titles today as it is. You know, are you using the ultra settings still on those games? Are you using mid-range settings? Are you lowering everything you possibly can? Are you just cutting the anti-aliasing off? Are you picking and choosing? What do you have to do in order to play those games still with decent performance? Because that is ultimately going to determine whether or not your graphics card can keep up the next time an indie title comes out that is something you like to play. Now, that kind of brings us to the next more obvious one. What if you play mainstream titles that are all 3D games coming from AAA, publishers or developers rather, and you're expecting to play them on max settings? Yeah, your GPU isn't at least, if your GPU isn't at least the last couple generations, we're talking the 30 series or the 40 series, if we're talking NVIDIA. And now caveat too, by the way, just a quick aside. I keep using NVIDIA because I've been using NVIDIA graphics cards for many, many years at this point. I've gone to AMD from time to time, but my personal preference is sticking with NVIDIA. That doesn't necessarily have to be you, but obviously if you use AMD, then you already can translate what I'm saying in your head. If you stick with AMD cards, then you probably know what the equivalent would be. Now, that said, if you don't have the most recent last couple generations of graphics cards that are coming out, then you're probably going to struggle keeping up with these titles here soon. But that still depends whether or not you play them at max graphics settings, right? The joy of gaming, of PC gaming, is the customization aspect, right? It's not just being able to use keyboard and mouse. You can oftentimes plug a keyboard and mouse into a PlayStation or into an Xbox and still play games that support keyboard mouse. The joy of PC gaming, to the largest extent for the vast majority of users, is the customizability, we'll say. And that includes being able to lower graphics settings to increase your performance if you want to. I know several pro gamers that intentionally lower their graphics settings, even if they have the latest GPUs, just to ensure that they don't ever have to worry about performance issues when they're in a competitive situation. Me personally, I often lower the graphics settings in favor of performance as well. I do play a lot of 2D games, yeah, so I don't particularly need my games to look photorealistic in order for me to enjoy them. Maybe you do. I don't know you like you know you, but I would implore you to consider your tolerance for lowering your graphics preferences. The lower you're willing to go, the longer that graphics card is going to last, and maybe long enough to increase your budget a little bit if you do need to upgrade your graphics card. Also, maybe some of the games you want to play aren't even AAA, but your GPU is just so old that the game won't even start because it doesn't recognize it. You know, I don't know if you've seen some of the games lately on Steam in particular, but sometimes you get a little pop-up that says, you know, graphics card not supported or not detecting a graphics card or something along those lines. I've had this issue with some of my devices that I use today, but it's usually because they have an integrated graphics card, not an old one. But let's say that your GPU is super out of date for the games you want to play, on the settings you want to play them. Are there still other things to consider before just forking out a bunch of money so that you can finally get an upgrade? Well, that brings us to the third factor here. And this wouldn't be a Stay Skwirlly podcast episode if I didn't encourage you to consider cloud options. I feel like so many of my episodes talk about cloud services and gaming, but you know that is because I travel a lot, right? So my Smite stream, for example, this past week on Monday, I streamed Smite entirely using GeForce Now. Zero lag whatsoever. Granted, I have a solid internet connection at home, and my desktop is wired Ethernet. It's not using Wi-Fi on my desktop computer. Could I play Smite natively on my desktop? Absolutely. I do it all the time. In fact, every stream that you've ever seen of me playing Smite, I'm playing it natively on my desktop computer at decent graphics settings. No performance issues at all. So why would I use GeForce Now then? Well, in part, I was kind of testing GeForce Now. I was testing cloud services. I wanted to see, like, hey, if I was on my desktop, is there a pragmatic reason to use GeForce Now? Well, I think the whole reason we have this podcast episode today brings about the reason why I would want to test this, right? I wanted to understand just how far cloud gaming services have come in order to determine how important a new graphics card was to my desktop. You know, with a current NVIDIA GTX 1080 sitting in my desktop, I'm running 3 4K monitors right now, and I can play a lot of the games that I play and stream them using OBS on the same machine at the same time while running multiple, Google Chrome browser windows and Discord oftentimes, and maybe even playing a video or music in the background. Now, granted, a lot of that isn't powered by the GPU, but the fact that the GPU has to process the video for all of that on 3 4K monitors is kind of a big deal. 4K wasn't that big yet in 2017 when I bought in 2016 when the 1080 came out. So at this point, my 1080 is responsible for all of the video displays on 3 4K monitors, in addition to whatever game I'm playing, in addition to processing the buffer rates needed to record and or stream in OBS. So there's a lot of stuff that I'm putting, responsibility on my GPU for. So could I do this with just replacing how I game, or rather replacing what I'm gaming on? Technically, the input and the output is happening on my desktop, but all of the processing is happening at a data center somewhere in Northern Virginia, with GeForce Now. So I wanted to understand if this was even practical. Also, my Shadow PC also has the option to, in its subscription, to upgrade its GPU to a higher-end NVIDIA model as well, which would mean AAA titles at max settings with higher FPS and other features, right? Enshrouded, by the way. I've been also playing that a lot lately, and I've been doing that entirely through GeForce Now. Now, that was primarily because I wanted to play Enshrouded on my mini PC, on my gaming laptop, which Enshrouded is one of those Steam games that will not start because it doesn't recognize a dedicated GPU. I have an integrated GPU on my mini PC. So Enshrouded it'll install, but it won't start. I can play Smite, I can play Final Fantasy XIV on my mini PC, both of those, but I can't play Enshrouded. So I started playing Enshrouded through GeForce Now, realized how great it was working, and that was over Wi-Fi, even sometimes over cellular Wi-Fi. So I figured, you know what, let's try this for my desktop. So literally the last several Enshrouded streams that you've seen on my Twitch and YouTube have been through GeForce Now as well. So I'm starting to process a lot of games through these cloud services instead. There's even a number of Microsoft published games that are available on Xbox Game Pass Ultimate for PC as well. So if you've got Xbox Game Pass, maybe you don't have the Ultimate version for PC, pick up Ultimate for just a few extra bucks, and you get access to all of those many, hundreds or even thousands. I don't know how many games it is, but it's a lot of Microsoft published games available on Game Pass. Basically, between GeForce Now and Xbox Game Pass for those serviced games that they support, then I have my Shadow PC potentially for picking up any games I can't do with GeForce Now or Xbox Game Pass. I can literally play any PC game I want through some kind of cloud service with a half-decent internet connection. Like, literally, I do this for a lot of these games, sometimes on my cell phone, Wi-Fi. And if the connection is super tight, I won't notice any lag whatsoever in my experience the whole time. So I'm currently at a place in my desktop lifespan that I'd normally have upgraded my GPU by now. But because I have so many conflicting priorities with where I spend my money and things, I haven't done it yet. So I'm at a point now where I just wanted to see if I needed to raise the priority on a new GPU or if I could just find a workaround that completely negated the need for a GPU at all. In my case, cloud services with a wired home internet connection may legitimately replace my need for a new graphics card on my desktop for the foreseeable future. Okay, so foreseeable future is like a term I'm using super lightly here, sure. Like, I know I'm going to replace my 1080 at some point down the road, in probably the not too distant future, with an RTX 30 series or better. But to be honest, it's not necessarily going to be for gaming. It's for a bunch of other purposes. I want to still be able to power my three 4K monitors while simultaneously having the accelerated performance for media editing. I still use Photoshop a lot and Premiere for all of the image editing, graphics editing, creation, production, post editing, all of that. There's also the chat with RTX feature, the AI feature that I talked about, 1 or 2 episodes ago, where NVIDIA now allows on 30 series or better, this basically chat GPT, branded their own way. It's generative AI, but available to the average consumer with a desktop graphics card of a 30 series or better. And you can use this chat GPT-esque chat service, AI service, for finding files in a better and bigger way. It's super cool. And then, finally, the better ray tracing and graphics upgrades and a handful of games that I can't play in a cloud service, like Final Fantasy XIV, will come in handy, but all of those are like tertiary for the other reasons that I would get one. And like I said earlier, I can play FF14 on my Shadow PC in the cloud if I really wanted to. Anyway, the point is, should you upgrade your GPU is a question with so many variables to consider these days. It's a more complicated question and answer than it was just 5 years ago, or certainly compared to 10 years ago. Price, graphical and gaming personal preference, the cloud service options for less than adequate devices, all major vectors to think about and weigh your options with before ultimately deciding to upgrade. That's basically the TLDR. All right, y'all. That's essentially all I had for you guys. I told you it was going to be a little bit of a shorter episode today. I Didn't have much more prepared beyond that. Like I said, we cut out the news segments at the beginning a little bit. We cut it short anyway, aside from the Superman news. But we'll catch up on all that next week. Yeah. So hopefully you guys are having a great week wherever you are. We will be coming back from San Diego. We fly home Saturday. So like I said, next week we'll be back to a regular schedule. And I look forward to catching you guys on the next episode. And as always, stay squirrely.